Okay, guys. So the next part that we're going to learn about methods is passing by value and what that means. The example I feel is a little bit harder to understand. So we're going to walk through that in code and as well give a couple more ways that we can create methods using different variables. So if we look back at my code, move this some. Okay. I have created a couple variables. One is a string that I'm going to call world, and then two int variables that I have put in values for 10 and 25. So I'm going to work with the string variable first so we can see it. So I have two print cases right here. One where the variables, I'm pulling the value before I run the method and after that I run the method. So let's go ahead and create a method. Public static, in this case, I don't need to return anything. Let's say void change word. And in this, I'm going to pass in a string type variable. Let's call it word. And just so we know, whatever I call my variable in here, I can call it in the exact same thing here because this exists differently than this. So just because I say string variable, if I give it a different value, so string variable I'm saying is hello. If I'm running my code, let's go ahead and print one. So system.out.println, the value inside method. And I print string variable. Okay. So I am passing the value of what I am holding inside of this variable string variable. And actually, I forgot to even call the method. But that's awesome. Okay, so let's call the method change word. And I pass in the string variable. Computer's going slower than I'm typing. Okay. Let's run it. Okay, so I have my before method where it should print out world. I am changing that word to hello. So that should print here. It should print hello instead of world. And we want to make sure we understand what's happening afterwards. So this is where we want to make sure that we're understanding what's happening in the values. Because if we're calculating stuff and we're not passing it back, not resaving it as something else, then that value isn't really very useful for us if we're trying to pull it again. So see here, before I ran the method, it has a value of world. Inside the method, it's hello. But when I call it again, it's still world because this variable right here is not the same variable as this variable. Okay? And here, when I hover over it, it says can be converted to a local variable name. And this is what I was talking about. So if I start typing this, a lot of times when I'm calling it, it will pop up with my value. It will pop up with the name that I have here so that I know what I need to pass it to. So, passing in that string variable is not doing anything for me. I could pass in, anything else, but as soon as I put in quotes, see how it says string variable right here? That's this. That's just the name. I don't need to type this out, okay? It's just literally the name. So if I change this to, let's say, word, I'm going to need to have it. Let me go ahead and fix that. Word and word. When I call it as a requirement, it's like I'm declaring that variable. And so here, it's like I'm declaring it. Then I can give it a value, but it only exists inside of here. So it doesn't matter if I'm changing it. It doesn't matter if the variable is the same. Okay. What I want to do, if I want to have a method that's going to change the value outside of that method, I need to resave. So this is where we would want to be returning, say, a string. Okay. And then instead of losing my train of thought, sorry. Instead of just trying to print it out or anything, I can actually take that string variable that I have up here and reassign it that method. Okay, so if I did it this way, where I'm calling that word, and let's go ahead and put in that string variable. So string variable. We already know doing it this way, it's not really going to do anything. However, I am taking that variable, I'm assigning as word, I'm returning it to the string. So this may seem a little convoluted, and I'll change it again so we can see it work a different way. So if I wanted to, say, play around with my word, where maybe I wanted to take off just that first letter, I could do that. I could pull a whole sentence and break it up into smaller pieces and print or return just some of the smaller pieces. So this is just kind of a small example to show. Okay. Now, in this case, string variable was world right here. But now when I ran that change word, I changed word to hello. That's what I'm returning, or whatever I wanted to return. I'm re-saving it as this string variable. So it's saving over whatever world is, and now it's hello. I can never pull that world back unless I resave it again as world. Okay, so this is another way that we can run the method. And just because we're dealing with strings doesn't mean that we have to return a string. Okay, I can create, let's say, that I want to create a method that is using multiple requirements. Okay, so let's do one, and we're just gonna make it really crazy. So I want it to return, but this time I want it to return a Boolean, and a Boolean is just going to be a true or false crazy method. In this crazy method, it's going to require a string, word. It's going to require an int, number 1, and an int number 2. Okay. Now inside of that method, I can still print stuff in there. So I could print, say, system.out.println hello, and then whatever was passed into it. And I could return, say, the max of a number. So if number 2 is greater than number 1, I want to do something if number 2 is less than number 1. That's not right there. Number 1. I want to do something else, and again, because we're dealing with max numbers, we could have greater than, less than, or the same, so else. Now, I don't want to have my code where it's checking this and checking this, so I want it to do either one. So that would be an else if. Then I want to do some other code. So in this case, I am going to do, say, int max. And I will print, or I don't know, let's see, max is equal to number 2. Max is assigned number 1. And if not, max is number, let's say 2, doesn't really matter. Okay, so I need to return a Boolean though. That's what it's saying right here. I have to return something. So I could say, because I'm doing my crazy method, that I want it to return true when there is a max number and false when there isn't. So even though I have this, let's just say I want to return false. And even though I have this, I could print out, the max number. So let's go ahead and do that. System.out.println max. Okay. But then I want it ultimately to return true. And here I want it to return true. Okay, so this crazy method, it's really just going to say hello to whatever word I pass in, and then it's going to test for max number, and will return true or false. True if there is a max number, and false if they're the same. So again, I could run my method. I'm still getting some print statements, so I could say crazy method. I have to pass in stuff, so let's go ahead and pass in. Let's do value 1, value 2, and then the string variable. But now I have an error. Why? Because it has expected parameters and I did not follow them. Okay, if I look, it's saying that it wants a string, an int, and an int. Okay, that's what it wants. But what it's seen was an int. This one was okay, so that one's not read. And then it found a string when it's supposed to have an int. Okay, so this is telling me I put this in the wrong order. String variable needs to go in the order that it was created when I created the method. String has to come first. The order that I put them in does matter. Okay, so I call the string variable, then value 1. Now if I called value 2 and value 1, that would still be fine because they are both ints. It doesn't matter what order, but because I am creating this with a string, I have to create it with a string here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this, see what it looks like. Okay, so this is still parsing, but once it finishes, we're going to see that we will still get some of the print lines, but it's not returning that Boolean value that we're called it for. See how it says hello world, and then it's giving me max of 25. That's because I actually put print statements, but it's not saying anything about true or false. Okay, now if I wanted to say create a Boolean answer and have that method run and store it, then I could maybe print another statement and have what that is. So print one, and I could print answer, and I could go ahead and run this again, and then that would be pulling all the information. Okay, so let's watch that run. Now there are a couple stipulations that we can do when we're doing this. When we're trying to pass a value back, you can't pass more than one thing. You can't pass a string and an int. You can't return a string and an int outside of the method. So there's a couple ways that we got to deal with it. Either we got to break up our methods in such a way that method is only doing one thing. It's only dealing with that string and then returning a string, or that int is only doing one thing and it's returning another int, so that I could save it as resave it over my old variable, so I have that new stuff. Okay, so see how it's doing that right there, but I can't do Boolean comma int comma string. It doesn't work that way. And it's just erroring out. Okay, it only will return one thing. There are a couple other ways around it as you guys are developing your projects. If they become meaningful to you, that you need to have it return multiple things to be able to do your stuff, usually it means that you're going to have to kind of rethink how you're planning your methods. But if you do truly have a case that you can't think it through, please contact me so I can help you guys plan the logic, or I might have to introduce you static variables. Okay, all right, so that's it for this video. We created a couple different methods where we were passing requirements and we were playing around with what we were returning. We also talked about passing by value, that just because something is inside of a method and I make changes to it, even if it's got the same name as a previously created variable, it does not change stuff outside of it unless I resave over what that value was by returning whatever the calculation did inside it. Okay, so good luck, have fun.